So you had said you were doing runs 5 to 6 weeks and before. Now we're starting the preparation process 6 weeks in advance in total. So that's one of the first differences that jumps out to me. Can you just hopefully you have your journal that you had written in and you can kind of walk us through, but can you just walk us through what this was like right at the beginning to start preparation where you would normally be running things? And what was it like to only be doing the technical things? Did you feel anxiety that you should have been doing more? I'm just curious for some of your thoughts about what it was like to embrace right at the beginning this different style of preparation.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say the first and foremost, it required a really high degree of trust because, as you already pointed out, compared to how I would have previously prepared for a recital, I was starting way, way, way late. So there were definitely some anxious thoughts, some doubts in my mind about, am I really going to be ready? Am I going to be able to pull this off and have a successful performance? But as I started to get into the process, even just 2 or 3 days into that first program, I started to notice a marked difference in terms of how much more I was getting accomplished in that 2 to 3 day span. And so then that in turn gave me confidence. And that small success there at the beginning helped me to see, okay, well, this is working. So I just have to trust that if I keep doing what's working, that I'm going to get to where I need to be.
Can you talk a little bit about using the program, like how you used it? I'll give a little bit of a hint. It's, recording the first repetition, listening back, fixing some things, recording the next. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Using the program as a tool for understanding how much to record, and then what things you did in between repetitions. How did you go about fixing problems that you found? I forgot to mention this, that the focus of the first 2 weeks is finding problems and solving them in these most technical things. So we're not worried about trying to be able to perform anything. We're not worried about, can we put it all together? We're just worried about, in these most technical things, how many problems can you find and how many of those problems can you solve? Can you walk us through a little bit about just how you learned to use the program and how it changed over the course of the 2 weeks? 'Cause I'm sure the end of the 2 weeks, you were a little bit more adept than the beginning of the process at using this program to practice deliberately.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. So 2 things that were critical, I think, were reduced tempo, like even slower than I would have normally thought to go. I think it's customary for a lot of people to maybe try something the first time at 80% tempo or 75% tempo, but taking all of these more technical licks from pieces all the way down to, I think it was 62% tempo we did in that first program. So that gave my mind time to think and really analyze as I was playing, okay, this is a challenge here, or I need to think more about this when I play this interval or whatever. And then the recording process also was key because I've always recorded my practice. That's something that my teachers have always instilled in me to do. But the way in which I was implementing that previously was a lot different. I think one thing I've realized from the program is that before I was recording way too much and not listening back frequently enough. So I may in the past have recorded like an entire etude, and then that takes 3 or 4 minutes, and then going back and listening to that, which takes another 3 or 4 minutes. And I'm not saying that that can't be beneficial as well, because I think it can be. But in terms of how I was implementing it into the program, I was recording each phrase, and a phrase would maybe only be 25 to 30 seconds. So you play that phrase for 30 seconds. There's immediately some rest built in while you listen back to that recording. And you almost get the benefit of having played it twice, because when you listen back, you're hearing all the things that you maybe didn't do as well as you would have liked, or you maybe even notice something that you didn't observe when you were playing through it because you were using too much processing power to think about something else. So that was really helpful. And I will say, one thing I had to plan around was practicing everything at much slower tempos, leaving time to listen back to my recordings, and then also maybe doing 1 or 2 practice runs in between repetitions. It took a little bit more time at first. Starting at the beginning of that first program, it would maybe take me 2, maybe 2.5 hours to get through all of the stuff I needed to play through that day. But by the end of that first program, I was getting through everything in an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and a half, which is really reasonable even for someone with a busy schedule.